Over the past couple of months, we've hit an inflection point at my business, Ticker Trends, in terms of enterprise and institutional adoption and demand for our products. Obviously, Ticker Trends, this business has been a massive learning experience for me, and I've always highly suggested that if you're thinking of doing your own business or wanting to get into financial markets, starting your own hedge fund, starting your own data business, that you should go out and do it because that's the best way that you'll learn the necessary skills to do it successfully. And so part of this is I want to share how the things that I did that really impacted the business that allowed us to scale to enterprise and institutional demand for our product, where just a year ago or 2 years ago the product didn't even exist. Let alone a year ago, the product was in a completely different state than it is now, and it certainly was not able to attract the type of customers that we are able to attract now. And so I think that there have been many lessons that I've learned doing this in terms of how to attract these types of mega multi-strat hedge funds that have billions of dollars in assets under management, and they want to purchase your product. Like, they come to you and they're saying, like, I want to get this product as fast as possible. Let us give you money and let us buy access to this product because that's how much they want what you have. The first thing that I think is absolutely crucial to attracting hedge funds and institutional clients is you have to understand that in these types of technical industries, different people have different skills. So some of these portfolio managers at these funds, they have certain understandings of the market that they're very used to. And as much as each fund and each pod and each manager has slightly different variations of what they care about, or how they look at things, generally many asset managers, to be honest, think about things in a similar way, and they have a certain format that they want information presented to them so that they can understand it within the context of their strategy. So when you're an information or research provider to these financial firms, the first most crucial thing that you need to do is not sell them something that they need to decode or translate into their language, but you need to give them the translated version of what they would already be looking for. So I think many like alternative data businesses that I've seen that try to innovate in the space, they come out with something that's really unique and different. But when they do that, they struggle to like communicate the value of that thing to these firms because ultimately these firms don't know how to use it. And then they struggle and they kind of get in this mindset of like, well, it's so obvious how to use it, but no one can figure it out. And so it's almost like they're trying to sell this product that's in, just making this up. They're trying to sell a product that's in Japanese, but the people that are using it can only read English. And I think that that's what many financial data providers do. And that's what we did initially as well, is we were selling this product that was super confusing as to how can they actually extract the information that they want from that product and translate it into information that they can put into their models and their strategies that they've already thought about and that they've used for 10 or 20 years. And one of the biggest inflection points in what we did is we realized that we need that translation layer. We need to do the translation for them so that they don't spend time or effort figuring out how to use the information and instead just have to spend time and effort doing the things that they've always done, which is taking the information, translated into their language, and figuring out, what their investments or what their decisions are based on that information that you're providing to them. So generally, this is a really, really important step for an alternative data business. In our case, the way that looked was KPI forecasts. So taking unstructured data and translating that into forecasts for reported metrics of the businesses. And that was like a clicking point for our business because now all of a sudden it goes from, oh, well, this data provider kind of has this interesting stuff, but I don't really know how to use it, to, oh, this data provider has interesting stuff. I can just take this number that they're giving me and plug it into my model and compare it to the other numbers that I'm getting from other people. And now it becomes infinitely useful really easily for any decision that I'm trying to make. So for us, that translation layer was the KPI forecasts. But I think that's a really, really crucial element to getting into the alternative data business, is translating your information to something that's easily valuable to everyone else, because if not, you're speaking in a different language that they don't understand. The other thing that I think is really important in the alternative data business, and the other thing that caused this inflection point, because obviously translating it into something they understand, kind of anyone can do that. Anyone can put out a forecast number for some reported metric. Now, how do you get them to care, right? How do you get them to care about that forecasted number? Well, I think what's really important is you have to be willing to prove yourself and prove yourself publicly. What we've done, and I think a lot of alternative data businesses are scared of doing this, is we've been exceedingly public and like very have had a lot of communication around how certain certain views that we have on different businesses, or certain forecasts or certain pieces of information that we think is interesting or deviates a lot from consensus. And the reason we do that is because you need to do that to attract the interest and to hook in those people that you want to have as customers and clients. Because once they see 2 or 3 examples of that from you, then they know that they can trust or look into what you're doing further because you've proven yourself. So I think this is another element that's so important, is how we did it is we constructed these like marketing campaigns in a way around different views that we had on certain businesses that deviated significantly from consensus. So when you have a perspective that the market doesn't expect, and you're really confident about that perspective because of your information, because of your data, because of your research process, because of your KPI forecasting, whatever it is, then you should take that piece of information. And you don't need to do this all the time. Obviously, you can keep things most of the time private, but just as a marketing strategy, take some of these pieces of information that you're really confident about, make 1 or 2 of them public, and do that to show to people that what you're doing, show them a little sneak peek of that alpha, of that magic that they can get if they're purchasing your product. Because then that's what will hook them in and allow them to trust and prove that what you're doing is unique. And this kind of goes to my next point as well, which is this element of being unique. So once you're translating your information into a language they can understand, and you've proven yourself by going out and saying, hey, Apple's going to go up 500%, and then the next day Apple goes up 500%, so you look really smart now that you've proven yourself, then I think the other thing is you want to differentiate your signal. And I think this is a really interesting element. So one thing that I thought a lot about when we were getting into this KPI forecasting market is what do we want to compete with, right? And I think typically what someone might think is, well, I just want to be the most accurate. Like I want to be, I want to have the lowest margin of error across all my metrics, and if I have a really low margin of error, then I'm going to be successful. Now, I think to some extent this is true. Like if you just have a 0.2% margin of error on your forecast for 1,000 different reported metrics, then you'll probably be pretty successful. But to be honest, I think that you don't need that to be. I think you don't need that. And also, very often, there might be someone else that has already built a better system around that metric that you're trying to forecast, and they might have a lower margin of error than you. So like if I'm trying to forecast, I'm just going to make up a number, iPhone sales for this year, there might be 50 other data providers that are forecasting iPhone sales for this year, and one of their margin of errors might be 0.1%, and you're trying to get to like 0.3%. So you're already like, not as good as them in terms of the accuracy side. But I think what people need to realize is that accuracy is not the only thing that funds care about or that asset managers care about. And in fact, I think that accuracy is not so important. It's more the differentiation in signal. So going back to proving yourself, if you go out in the market and you say Apple's going to go up 500% tomorrow and you end up being right, the reason that people are interested in that is because you had a non-consensus view and you were correct ahead of everyone else. You were like a day early in saying that Apple is going to go up 500% because you had some data on it or whatever. In the same view for your KPI forecasts, sure, you might have metrics that have a higher margin of error than the average KPI forecasting firm or whatever. Maybe it's not the most accurate predictions for these specific things that you're trying to anticipate. But if it's consistent in being able to pick up on differences from consensus, then that is actually the most valuable aspect of what you can be doing, because now you have a differentiated signal. So like, let's say my iPhone sales number, my forecast is like, has a 3% margin of error, and I'm competing with this firm that has like a 0.1% margin of error. I might never be able to get below that 0.1% margin of error, but let's say one day my forecasting method starts to anticipate that there's going to be a 20% deviation from what everyone else is saying, right? And now keep in mind, I've had a 3% margin of error in the past in trying to forecast this metric, but now it's saying that I have a 20% deviation from consensus. Now I come out, I put all these research reports, all these marketing campaigns around how my metric says that there's going to be a 20% deviation from consensus. The number comes out and my number is exactly correct, right? Like that is correct. It surprises everyone. That firm that has a 0.1% margin of error saw that there was a little increase, like 5% increase, but they didn't forecast the whole 20% increase. Now you have a differentiated signal that, even though it had a 3% margin of error, it was able to pick up on something that those other firms were not looking at, or were not paying attention to, or not able to pick up in their data. So I think really, if you have these three things, which is some translation, get it into a language that they can understand, prove yourself, and then have a differentiated signal, even if it's not the most accurate, even if it's not the most consistent, even if sometimes it's wrong, but maybe 70% of the time it's right, or you pick up on those like deviations pretty consistently, but maybe on the quarter to quarter, it's not going to be the best signal or something like that. Those things have a lot of value for firms, and they will realize that, because what you can also keep in mind is that they can use it in conjunction with that 0.1% margin of error data set that they're probably already purchasing. Like they're probably already purchasing that 0.1% margin of error data set on iPhone sales. And now your data set with the 3% margin of error, they're using as a supplementary signal. So that's why in financial markets, like there's this huge opportunity for people to give these differentiated signals that can give new pieces of information, new signals, new alpha, new edge that the other people aren't picking up on. And then when you do that, then these institutions and enterprises and firms, they're going to come running to you and wanting to purchase your product, because they don't want to miss out on those signals. And ultimately, yes, they can have that thing that's right like 90% of the time. Like maybe they're purchasing that 0.1% margin of error iPhone sales data source and it's right almost every single time. But now they know that next time they see that 20% deviation from consensus in your data set and in your forecast, that 0.1% data set is not picking up on, now they have a new tradable signal that might make them millions of dollars, even if it only happens like once every 6 quarters or something like that. And now it becomes an insurance policy for them being able to say, well, okay, most of the time we can rely on the 0.1% data set, but now we know that if we don't want to miss out on that one time when Apple went up 500%, then we need to be purchasing this data set so that in case it happens again, we receive that piece of information and we can position ourselves. So maybe they had a short on Apple and they would have needed to unwind that before the next day, when that, even the probability of that event happening could have happened ahead of time. Like they could have had information on the probability of that thing happening rising ahead of time if they had been purchasing your data set. So now all of a sudden your data set is worth like a perceived millions of dollars to this fund, because they can have that differentiated signal. Anyways, I think those are just 3 bullet points that I wanted to talk about, of things that I think are important when selling to institutions or enterprise customers in the alternative data space. Obviously, I've learned a lot, and we still have a lot to learn, and we learn more every single day at my business at Ticker Trends. One thing that I also want to mention as well for people who are trying to get into this is that I think that it's important to listen to feedback from other people about your business or about the data or about your strategy or something like that. But I also think that you're the one that knows the most about what you're doing. And either you can take their feedback and understand why it's wrong, or you can take that feedback and realize that what you're doing is not differentiated. And I think it's really important to be confident that what you're doing is differentiated. Because if your signal is the same as that 0.1% margin of error data set, and it never deviates from that like signal generally, and it's just less accurate and it's not as good, then you're not going to be able to sell that product to the people who are already buying the 0.1% data set. But if you're very confident that you have a signal that is different than everyone else, you might get feedback from people not being fully convinced of that until they see it, until you've proven yourself. Because by default, people are going to think that what you're doing or the way that you're doing it is the same or has already been done before. Because if they had that idea, they would be doing it themselves. If people knew how to have alpha in the market based on your data sets or based on the information that you're looking at, then they would have already done it. So the whole thing is that if you're actually differentiated, you'll be able to prove it and you'll be confident in being able to prove it. If you're not sure that you can prove it or that you're differentiated, then you might need to rethink your approach and maybe choose a new strategy. But I think for us, that's been really important because I even remember that early on, I had feedback from people who were very knowledgeable, way more experienced than me, etc. And I mean, I think with any business, people will always have doubts about your approach to something or how you're doing it. But ultimately, the thing that gets you through that is your own confidence and also your own ability to be able to prove them wrong in a way, right? And I think financial markets are so cool because, yes, like someone can go and tell you, hey, like 1 million people are doing this and you're just going to be the number 1,000,001. Like they might tell you that. And the way you can actually disprove them, not even by getting 100 million in revenue, but by literally just being right against consensus. Like if you're consistently putting out interesting information and things that deviate from consensus and catching new alpha in the market that no one else is looking at, then you're right, even if you only have like $10,000 in sales or you're managing like a $1,000 portfolio. So I think that's a really cool thing about financial markets is like if you have a piece of information that's not being priced in or that the market doesn't understand, then you can prove that to someone quite literally, like with nothing. Like you could just put out some blog posts and 5 days later when the price goes in your direction or when the metric gets reported and you were exactly right, then like people are going to care about that and you'll only be able to build your reputation more and more and more and have more word of mouth spread and have more people who are really, really impressive and have good backgrounds and a lot of capital come to you and be like, hey, well, we see what you're doing. Like you're doing something interesting and they'll want to get involved in that. And even if at first they come to you and they say like, hey, this seems cool, but we're not interested right now. If you keep going and you keep putting out those things like, look, I'm right. I predicted this thing that no one else thought about. Then eventually they're going to come back around and they'll say, well, okay, maybe like 3 months ago, we didn't think that this was interesting, but now we think this is interesting. Because again, you have the alpha, you have the unique information, and they're going to want to get that from you no matter what. Even if they had a bad first impression, even if they thought you weren't interesting at first, eventually they will want to come back because that's how these markets work. That's how this information works. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll keep making videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.